Hey everyone, okay, so here we are at part 3 of your PACE route planning and logistics video series. Part 1, we have covered your initial planning of routes, okay, and a little critical thinking exercise with a map example. Part 2, we have talked about additional logistics with route planning and operations in utilizing your routes of your PACE plan. Part 3, we're going to talk more about mobility logistics, okay? So, again, PACE planning is an acronym that applies in many different ways, mainly with communications and communications management, but PACE is also used for a variety of different other applications and practical usages to include route planning and route logistics and mobility. So, you've got your route planned, then you're scoping it out, implementing your route, taking action with your route, doing other factors with a more challenging logistical planning due to the layout of the terrain in the second example, and your network and your mapping and user-based assets and platforms that you can access, your OSINT, your GeoSINT, your human intelligence, your network, mutual aid, everything, utilizing all of that for your logistical support in utilizing your route plan. Now we're going to talk about mobility logistics. This is more of like your nuanced stuff when it comes to your vehicle and what you have in your vehicle. So, again, when it comes to protective security details and ERTs, emergency response teams, like I did, and then with executive protection and military operations, logistically you have a lot more support. You have a lot more tools and things that you can access and you have. So with the civilian side, with Minuteman teams, with disaster preparedness and things like that, logistically you're going to have as many items and tools as possible with you and your vehicle and your person, and the same with your team and all of the vehicles involved in your movement with your route planning and your route implementation and taking action with your ingress or egress of your routes. So with vehicles, what's one of the biggest things to consider here? What are its capabilities overall? Is it going to be useful for actually like getting long distances and rapid mobilization and movement? Is it able to go off road? Is it just a sound vehicle? These are things that you need to take a lot of preemptive measures with and a lot of pre-planning with. PMCS, making sure you're PMCSing your vehicles and your equipment and everything, making sure your vehicle is sound and good to go. Having an off-road vehicle or a little bit heavier vehicle to be able to move vehicles out of a way that may be blocking a route with your PACE plan, that's going to be huge too, as well as the off-road capability. Do you have an SUV with some good tires and a decent suspension that you can actually get on some bumpier roads kind of out of the way? Are you able to push and get other vehicles out of the way to clear your route if you're unable to get to your, say, contingent or tertiary route, or you have to remaneuver and get through that barricade to get to the next route? Vehicle training, vehicle practices. This is something that needs to be trained on as well, and this is part of your mobility logistics. Being able to thrive in your vehicle and get from point A to point B, utilizing your routes and your PACE plan. So, making sure your vehicle is sound and good to go, that you have a backup full-size tired wheel, and things like that. Other items, you need to have towing capability or ability to link vehicles together to extract that vehicle, or at least get it out of the way, empty it out of any other vehicles in your little convoy in your team, and then keep moving if for some reason it's disabled or otherwise. So having tow package stuff, so your fucking brain fart, your ribbon joints, basically, tow chains, tow lines, things like that. Okay, that's one thing. And I did answer some of these questions with my first Q&A, also regarding the weather, extreme weather. Lots of rain, snow, big issue up here. Snow and blizzards, things like that. What else might you need? You might need tire chains. You need to have good tires. all season, possibly off-road capable tires. Having good vehicles for that, okay? And good tires for that. So you might need tire chains for snow, ice, and things like that. Or even just, it's also useful just for hill climbing and things like that when you do, if you do have to end up going off-road. Other things, fluids, making sure you have backup fluids for your vehicle. Obviously, you need to have water anyway, just part of your logistical preparedness and survival aspect, but water's good too for your vehicle. Having your coolant, motor oil, transmission fluid, brake fluid, you know, things like that. Have some spare fuses if your vehicle uses fuses. Have a relatively decent toolkit, okay? So sockets, that includes, you know, your 10mm socket for your battery. It's a commonly used size socket. You know, everyone jokes about it being missing all the time. I always have multiple in my vehicle. Have a good socket set. Have wrenches, screwdrivers, you know, all that stuff. Even oil filter wrench and things like that, okay? You may want to have a spare oil filter so you can do basic maintenance on your vehicle and try to fix problems. So tools like that, okay, and fluids. You're also going to want to have, especially condition dependent, but a shovel, just overall, a shovel is good. A metal-headed shovel, like a gardening spade shovel or something. That's really good to have, to be able to dig yourself out, and if your vehicle gets stuck, to dig it out. Part of that maneuver and extraction process and tow process and things like that too. Tow straps, ratchet straps, like stuff like that is good. Even bungee cords is good to have in there too. So a shovel. Also have a tree saw or a tree axe. I keep a Husky tree axe in my truck at all times. In the winter here, trees go down all the time. In high winds and the occasional time when we have tornadoes, not as often, but we do get tornadoes here, trees go down. You might have to use an axe or a chainsaw if you want to have a chainsaw in your vehicle to clear a path, clear your route, whatever it may be. So that's really, really, really necessary to have too. Obviously, logistically, otherwise, you need all your support items. Like I said, water, have your food. You're going to need your kit. You're going to need your ruck. You're going to need all your medical supplies. A full TCCC bag, full CLS bag, and then some, and depending on the logistics of your team and who has what and things like that. But you need to have all that stuff. Items to keep you warm, so shelter items, sleep system items, things like that. And all those nuances of stuff that you should have in your vehicle. Signaling devices, spare batteries for radios and communications, for lights, things like that. You know, signaling, be it flares, chem lights, reflective devices, whatever it may be. All these logistical items that you need to have in your vehicle, prepped and ready to go, or that you can grab and go and throw in your vehicle and you can get the hell out of there. Okay, so there's a lot of nuances and a lot of items that you need to plan with and have account of to have in your vehicle for your mobility logistics in implementing your PACE route, your PACE plan routes. Okay, so towing is going to be a big one, apart from having a vehicle that is apt to be able to maneuver through some potentially bumpy and otherwise hazardous terrain, or just roads in general. We all know some places the roads are just dog shit, especially county roads and mountain roads and things like that. You need to be able to have a vehicle that can navigate those things. Having a little low riding sedan or a freaking 2-wheel drive minivan is not going to cut it. As useful as it may be for road-based stuff, getting point A to point B, it can be very useful for that, especially a vehicle that can hold a lot of cargo. At some point, you need to consider the optimal choice for a vehicle for your area and based on your needs and your PACE plan, your emergency exigent planning situations, bug out, bug in, whatever it may be. Having a vehicle that stands out in adversarial situations and things like that, might not be a good idea. You might want to keep it looking pretty bare bones and normal until you are kind of out of harm's way and out of that risk, away from that risk where you can, get it coated in mud, camouflage it a little bit, whatever you need to do secondarily for that kind of thing. Initially, keep it looking normal, just like every other Joe Schmo on the road, until you're out of that situation, and then, you know, you're out in the sticks and you're getting down to some tactical operations and things like that. Things like that. So a lot of mobility logistics. So make sure your team is solid all around. Make sure your vehicles are good. Make sure you have all of the equipment that you can think of that you may need. Good tow equipment, good mitigation equipment, tree removal, things like that, clearing the road, a vehicle that can handle the terrain, as well as spare parts, fluids, and tools for your vehicle's needs, apart from all of your kit to sustain yourself, your family, your team, whatever it may be, all of that stuff. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to go to another image. Okay, we're going to look at this image in another location that I randomly picked. Well, kind of randomly picked. I know this area a little bit. I've been there before, but I picked it because it is unique in its pace route planning, because of where it is and the terrain and everything that it is, but also taking into consideration what are the practical and accessible routes with your pace plan to get to mutual aid and to otherwise implement your sound mobility logistics to navigate your routes. Okay, that's a big part of why I picked this image and what you should do with your critical thinking exercises and training otherwise, looking at this map and implementing a pace plan. Again, terrain's going to be different. It may not apply to everybody, but I know a few people that live somewhat near this area that will understand this, and they should find it useful, apart from all of that information that I just laid out with that. Okay, so this third installment here, mobility logistics. Again, go back, pay attention to the things that I said, make a list for yourself. If you don't have some of these items, go pick them up. Do what you can, or make sure somebody in your team that's going to be mobile with you or your mutual aid group has these items, so that you can keep yourself moving and thriving in the emergency, in the SHTF, whatever it may be. Okay, so let's look over at this map now. I'll narrate again, and we'll look at some of the factors that come in with your mobility logistics for your vehicle and your team in your movement, utilizing your routes that you've mapped for your pace plan. Okay, so here we go. Okay, here we go with part 3. So in this video we have talked about mobility logistics. So looking at this map in this series of terrain features and these routes for another critical thinking exercise in implementing a pace plan for mobility logistics. Okay, so that's making sure you have a sound vehicle that's optimal for this terrain and this environment, and all of those other factors that I talked about in the first part of this video. Look at the map here. What are going to be some optimal routes for your pace plan? Emergency planning, also for your SHTF and tactical operations considerations and things like that. Notice, with this terrain, it is mountainous. It is a lot of valleys and hills and mountains and a lot of cut-through mountain roads and things like that. So with mobility logistics, having the tools, besides a sound vehicle that can handle these roads and this terrain, having the tools to be able to help you thrive in transit in your route and all of the operations involved with utilizing your pace plan. Okay? So these roads can get pretty rough, okay? So you're going to need a pretty solid vehicle that can handle those types of roads, those types of elevations, and everything else considered. Tools-wise, you're going to have trees down in roads based on the situation. So you need to have those tools to be able to get a tree out of the way. Towing capability for vehicle, that's going to be something kind of necessary across the board. Other things to factor. There are a lot of rock falls. There's a lot of landslides in this area, okay? So what tools do you have to be able to get over that blockage, mitigate that blockage by using tools to get through it, or rerouting, utilizing your pace plan, getting to your alternate, secondary, or even contingent, tertiary, third route, whatever it may be. Okay? These are vital things to look at and understand with this situation, for various situations with this map and these terrain features. Okay? Again, it's going to apply differently for different people. That's why I've used various different maps, areas of the country, and different examples in these maps, because there may be applicability in one where there isn't in another for some people, but there's going to be applicability somewhere for someone. Terrain features are going to be a huge one here, which is why mobility logistics and everything we've talked about in this video are so important. Okay? So, again, the terrain is going to work against you in a lot of ways here. It can also work to your advantage with the routes that you utilize, that you plan and utilize and implement for your pace plan and take action with. Make sure that you're scoping your routes out. Make sure you're running your routes. Make sure that you're utilizing all of your assets and tools, as talked about in the second part of this video series, to most effectively succeed in your navigation of your routes through these kinds of roads, over these kinds of roads, and through these types of terrain. Okay, having the essential tools that you and your team can utilize to mitigate issues that you may face in your routes is essential. It is essential, whether it is for disasters, whether it is for adversarial forces, and things like that. This is why mobility logistics are so important, that everybody needs to take account of. So also with this, there's a lot of terrain here that you can use to your advantage. There's a lot of opportunities for getting the high ground. There's a lot of opportunities for creating blockages to deny the adversarial force access or routes themselves. That comes into a lot of those tactical operations with SHTF and Minuteman operations and whatever else. When it comes to safe transit for emergencies and things like that, there's a lot to consider here. And it's just gauging which are going to be the most optimal routes based on the direction that you want to travel and what you're doing, whether it's a bug in or bug out, all that stuff. There's a lot to look at here in figuring out which are going to be the most practical and optimal routes for you to utilize in your pace plan implementation and action. Okay? So again, I'm going to leave this image up for a little bit of critical thinking, work on some of your exercises here, and this is going to round off this third part video. Thanks again for tuning in. More stuff coming soon. Metal up. Out.